Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's emotional healing webinar on raising the inner child. This is going to continue in looking at the energy centers I use in assessing things in the emotional healing techniques. Moving on to the next two, 8 and 9. I want to start off with just a little bit more explanation about some ideas I've had from the tree of life. And one of them is that we develop our personality in stages. So like this shows the idea that there are like 5 worlds represented on the tree. There's the 3 main worlds in the middle, but the 2 at the top and the bottom. And the bottom world with numbers 10 and 11, which we talked about last night, which relate to father and mother, and our earliest childhood experiences of father and mother, is like the very earliest stages of our life. It's very foundational to our personality, like we talked about. What we're getting into next is this next area, which is the issues that tend to start coming up as we move out of infancy into becoming a child. We're going to talk about energy center number 9, which is liver, saying no. That's about round 2, kids start learning to say no, and then you progress upwards. So the world of the child, the young child, is kind of that world. Then you get into teen and up into the young adult world, which is the more of the social, the emotional world, which is also the social world. And then as you get to be an adult, maybe you should be developing more up into the mental world, and finally up into the more spiritual world. And so one of the ideas that occurred to me as I was doing emotional healing is there are kind of levels of growth. We move up and then in stages in our life. Now, what I discovered is that when a person has an emotional wound in one of these energy centers, it basically kind of shuts down their development. They don't fully develop the energies above that, because they're kind of stuck with a damage at a lower stage. If you think of it as the way a seed grows, a seed contains the final mature plant, whether it's a tree or a flower or a bush or whatever. And it unfolds in stages from sprouting, to growing bigger and bigger until it finally can reproduce and mature and so forth. Well, we have a personality, but our personality grows inward. The personality of the plant grows into its physical form. We have a physical form that's pretty much forms before we're even born, and the physical form doesn't change that much. We grow inwardly, spiritually, in our inner development, and we're designed to unfold in stages. So when you look at situations with you, me, all of us, okay, think about the fact that sometimes somebody says something or somebody does something, and you're just overwhelmed with very, very primitive emotions, anger, grief, fear, etc., that paralyze you. That you don't even act like an adult. You basically throw a temper tantrum, you throw a pretty pity party, you sulk, you do all these things that are, actually pretty childish, right? And you probably see that in other adults around you, maybe your partner or someone. And what I've come to realize is that's the nature of what I call an emotional wound, is that you in that area of your life, you never developed emotional maturity beyond that certain age. So you'll see plenty of adults that emotionally they will still react to life like they're little children. They can't cope with adult feelings and everything, and this is because of their emotional wounds that need to be addressed and healed. And so we when we're trying to heal all these lower energy centers, we're generally dealing with what I call the inner child, the stuff from childhood, the things that we never matured from. Now, to understand the healing process a little better, I want to talk about polarity, because one of the major issues that is part of developing our personality is the reconciliation of what appear to be two, in some cases, opposite energies that have to be integrated and harmonized to mature our personality. So, for example, there's a proverb that says, let not but kindness and truth depart from your mouth. It's something like that. So sometimes we have a hard time with being kind and being honest. When we're honest, we're kind of mean, maybe a little bit, critical, judgmental. When we're kind, we're bending the truth to try to make people happy. How do I reconcile those two? How do I speak my truth and at the same time be kind? How do I have responsibility for my life and still have fun? How do I reconcile my need for play and recreation with my need for work and responsibility? How do I have loving, open, trusting relationships and still protect myself from being emotionally hurt? I mean, that's a big one. That's one we're going to talk about a little later, because that's a real adult one. How can I be a sexual being and a spiritual being at the same time? Because we get this idea, well, there's nothing spiritual about sex, so sex is dirty and spirituality is lofty. And so when you have polarities in your head like that, where you can't see any way that you can have both, you tend to go to one extreme or the other. Can I be creative? Can I be practical? The whole model of the tree of life and what it represents and teaches to me in the thing is the idea of balance. How to find balance, how to balance all these aspects of ourselves and all these aspects of our life. Not go from one to the other, but how to integrate them all so that they form a wholeness. In fact, that's the whole idea of healing, is you make whole. You move beyond that. And so as we go in our exploration of this, there are three major dualities. I mean, there are more. There are plenty more in here in this thing of things that have that people get stuck on either or. But the one in the child, which is the liver and pancreas, which we're going to talk about today, the major adult one, okay, is which we'll talk about next time, is the thymus and heart energy. And then as we get older, the left and right brain duality becomes increasingly important. So the polarity we're talking about in this world of the child has to do with the liver center and the pancreatic center. And the liver center is on the right masculine side of the body and is the center that allows us to protect ourselves. So we've moved from the idea of being protected and nurtured by mother and father energy. Now we are internalizing that into internal protective energy and internal nurturing energy. Okay. So on the liver side, I'm trying to protect myself from pain. And so that involves sometimes getting angry and saying no and sticking up for myself. But it also, the liver energy drives my ability to work, achieve, plan, set goals, and say no. This is the most important thing. Say no to what doesn't serve me. Now, the reason why I say that this liver center probably starts developing around the age 2 is because that's when little kids start saying no. They start experimenting with asserting themselves, right? No. Pancreatic center is the ability to open up, to receive pleasure and joy, to have fun, to play, to be open to the moment, and to say yes to things. So many people get stuck on one side or the other of that duality. They either may be workaholics, all work and no play, or they may be all play and no responsibility. And finding the balance is part of what growing up is all about. Because children love to play, but children also have to learn to be responsible. And so there's a maturing process we go through to find the balance between those opposites that should start taking place in childhood. Okay. Now, what the problem is with polarity is it's an illusion. Really, it's the two halves of the same whole. So Emerson says in his essay Compensation, you can't slice something so thin that it only has a top. It always has a bottom. There's always a bottom and a top. And in every thing that exists, there are two natures. There is the manifest nature and the unmanifest nature. And they're always present, and they cannot be separated. Our mind wants to try to disconnect them. Emerson says people spend almost all their life trying to figure out how to disconnect what I want from the payment that's required from me to get it. In other words, the price of it. I want to have the thing without the work or the liability of it, and it's impossible. So Emerson explains that if you get something without having paid for it, then you're in debt to the universe. If you give something without having received something, the universe is in debt to you. And it will always be right. It will always be reconciled. So healing, as I mentioned, is to make whole. Every time we are able to reconcile a polarity or some seeming conflict between, because conflict is always like either or, this or that, this or that. The reconciliation is the blending of the two that makes a wholeness, okay? And when we are able to perceive the wholeness and restore the unity, we are healing, if that makes sense. And so when you see the way to heal, in other words, you see the reconciliation of the apparent conflict, you have an aha moment, like, like the light bulb goes on, and you're one step closer to oneness, to wholeness, to unity, which is like one author said, it's like taking a step closer to God, because God is one. All right. So I've mentioned this aspect in the previous webinars, which is the idea that we're hardwired to be good. And A.S. Nill, the founder of Summer Hero School, said, inside every child is a God, but when we undertake to mold the child, we turn the God into a devil. And I'm going to explain why that's so. I read this little book, and it was saying that after God made everything, it was called Who Told You You Were Naked? It says, after God made everything, he said it was good. But when he made men and women, he said, it's very good. Or this guy said, if you look at the original Hebrew, it could be translated as he made them excellent in every way. So if God made us to be good, if he instilled in us the impulse to be good, then, as I've said before, how do we get to be negative? And of course, that was the issue of dragons, which we'll review here in a moment. But the idea here in this duality that we're talking about of childhood and basically a physical level seeming polarity is this idea of pleasure and pain. And I think of pleasure and pain as nature's instructors, or the God behind nature's instructors, okay? So the way we are made, okay, in being made to be good is that when we do something that isn't good for us or for others, the end result, it may not be instantaneous, but the end result is always pain or suffering. There's always a negative experience when we choose to do something that's harmful to us or harmful to others. When we choose to do something that's good for us and good for the people around us, we experience a sense of pleasure and emotional happiness and satisfaction. It may not always be immediate because we may be struggling with the work or whatever, but built into that is that reaction. Emerson says in compensation that the action we take is a seed we plant, and the seed we plant will always yield after its kind. So if the seed is a negative, harmful seed to ourselves or others, it will always yield pain and suffering. If the seed is something good, it will always yield happiness and peace and love and positive things. And we all know what physical pain feels like. We all know what physical pleasure feels like. We also all know what emotional pain feels like. And we also know what positive feelings feel like. We understand what happiness and joy and love and peace are. So we all, therefore, have within us the ability to determine for ourselves, what is good and what is evil, what is right and what is wrong. It's hardwired into us. And that's what I was explaining in the last module. That's the basis of the question affirmation technique, which we're not going to talk about tonight, but it's the idea that we are instinctively wired to avoid pain and suffering and pursue pleasure and happiness. So here's what this boils down to in the case of understanding children. There's this really excellent book called The Continuum Concept, which I would encourage anyone to read, about a lady who went and spent some time living with a tribe in South America. And it talks about something that I also learned from a book called Children the Challenge by Rudolf Dreikurs, which is the idea, as much as possible, to allow children to experience the natural consequences of their own behavior. We learn by trying things and observing the consequences. We learn to walk because we see other people walking and we think, okay, how do you do that? And so we stand up and we try to figure out how to walk, and we fall down and, well, that didn't work. Get up again, try again, move around. Well, that didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And then we succeed and we go, oh, I did it. I figured it out. We learn everything that way. We do something and it injures us. We go, oh, I shouldn't do that. We do something and that was fun. Let's do that again. That's how we learn. Okay. But what we are so obsessed with in our culture is we think that any little pain that our children have, we've got to protect them from ever experiencing anything negative or wrong. I mean, like they can't have any disappointment or any blah, 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 and in what we do is we pervert this by disconnecting them from their own ability to observe and learn from what they do. And so what happens is, over time, all of us as adults, most of us adults, are very disconnected from our own inner gut knowing. Okay? We're talking about our gut knowing, the physical level, gut level of knowing things, of being able to discern what is good from what is not good for us. Look, I'll give you another really practical example. Children naturally eat until they're not hungry. They don't eat until they're full. They eat until they're not hungry. And then they may go run and play for a little while and want to come back and eat something else. But we have the conditioning. Oh, you eat 3 meals a day. You have to eat blah, blah, blah. You have to finish your plate. You have to clean up, eat your veggies. So what we wind up doing is we put all this pressure to try to force our children to eat by what we think they ought to eat, not by what their instincts are telling them they ought to eat. And I read an article that actually the more parents do that, the more likely their children are going to be obese. Because why? Because they're not going to connect with their own body signals about what's good and bad for them. This is a major issue with almost everyone in our society. And if you read the Continuum Concept, you'll understand why. It's because we base our whole society on the idea of punishing and rewarding to train people to do what we think they should do. So one of the things is pleasure is not sinful, as you cannot derive real pleasure from overindulgence in anything good. So like you eat, and many of you last week, had Thanksgiving, okay? If you eat until you've had enough to satisfy hunger, it doesn't produce any discomfort. It produces a feeling of satisfaction. You eat beyond that, and it produces discomfort. You feel bloated, you feel stuffed, you feel, sleepy and so forth, right? There's an immediate feedback, what I'm saying, that the body gives us, whether something was good for us or not good for us, right? And so children naturally follow their instincts, but you train them out of it. You train them out of it through reward and punishment. Because when we're exercising reward and punishment, we're trying to control other people. And one of the major lessons I talked about anger is that you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. You have to let go of thinking you control other people. Now, so how do you, people go, well, how do you do with your children? They're misbehaving. You control yourself. You control your reaction to them. They have the choice, this or this. Okay. If they choose something that you feel is good, then you basically you're going to respond this way. If you do something they don't like, you're going to respond that way, and they get to choose. And you can do that in perfect love. And I think that's actually the way God deals with us. He's set the entire universe up so that we get to choose. We get to choose the action. We get to choose the seed, but we don't get to choose what grows from the seed. What grows from the seed is predetermined by what the seed is. The seed and the final plant are the same thing in different stages. They are the two halves of the same whole. So it's like Emerson says, that what most people are trying to do is they're trying to get the nice end result, but by planting the wrong seed. And they're disconnected, so they cannot observe or realize inside of themselves, because they've never had enough maturity developing to be able to recognize, I'm the one who's choosing this, and therefore I'm experiencing this, and I don't like it, so I need to choose something different. I need to try something different. They're stuck. And this is really, some people have defined this as insanity, and I would be inclined to agree from what I observed that the insanity is that you'll continue to plant the same seed expecting that somehow the result is going to change, and it will never change. Okay. And that's where the dragon is coming in. The dragon is making you plant wheat seeds, expecting that somehow if you do the right fairy dance or the right whatever, somehow wheat seeds will grow corn, and it will never happen. All right. And that's what beliefs are all about. A belief is a way of being and living linked to our emotions, and those beliefs that we use to create our actions. In other words, we believe something, so because we believe it, we live it. We make choices based on our beliefs, and we have beliefs that are constructive. That is, beliefs that cause us to plant good seeds and reap good consequences. And we also have beliefs that are destructive, that cause us to choose things that are disempowering, okay, and cause bad consequences. So our positive beliefs put faith in the goodness of God, and our negative beliefs are linked with the fear, which is putting faith in the devil, putting faith in bad things happening, or so forth. So positive beliefs are attached to pleasant motivations, and they motivate us to do things. Positive beliefs are I can beliefs. And cultivating positive beliefs that I can instills useful programs in our brain, as long as we recognize that I can means that I'm going to do like the child. I'm going to figure out what, keep trying things until I figure out what works, right? Negative beliefs are attached to unpleasant emotions and cause us to avoid things. Negative beliefs include I can't, I shouldn't, and cultivating negative beliefs can install harmful programs in your brain. So negative beliefs can prevent us from seeing or understanding what is possible, limiting our potential, and thereby creating pain and suffering, because they cause us to continue to do things that are not working. Positive beliefs will open us up to see new possibilities, to be willing. Because if a child didn't believe they could walk, right? If they didn't have the positive belief that they could walk, they wouldn't keep trying when they fall down, right? So a positive belief causes us to keep trying until we figure it out. And that is what allows us to create really happy and joyful lives. So emotional healing things could be thought of as like computer viruses, bugs that basically create destructive ways of thinking and choosing that carry out irrational things that, what happens is I'm like with relationships. Okay. So I'm having problems with my kids, but I continue to try the same strategy with my kids that is not working, thinking it's the kid's fault, right? Without ever trying to change my strategy and find if there was something else that would work with the kid or with my partner or with my job or with whatever. Understand? So I get to blame the world because the world is giving me the feedback that I don't like. And so when I do my inner healing work, I create new beliefs. It changes things so that I will try a new way. I'll try something different and I'll find something that actually does work. So with that, we'll talk about the liver and pancreatic energy centers. So this is this world of the inner child. Okay, it includes the nurturing center, okay, having physical needs met, but it goes up into the anger center, which is will, the self-defense, exerting my will, all right? And then pancreas, which is receiving pleasure. The liver is pushing forward, it's aggressive energy. The pancreas is receiving energy. And then when I master that lesson, okay, when I'm able to take responsibility for myself and understand that I can choose, I'm choosing, I'm deciding what the consequences will be by my choices. So therefore, I have control. If I don't like what I'm experiencing, I can go study, do some research, and figure out new things to try, create some new beliefs, new activities, and change my life. Once I've mastered that idea, understand, of those two centers, I move into a place of inner centeredness. I feel comfortable and confident within myself, which is energy center number 7. And that's the purpose of what growing up should do for us. Okay, we start off with our mother and father providing security and nurturing, and then we move into the development of our own personality until we figure out that, we start to become self-empowered, and that moves us up into starting to move into adult center. So as I mentioned, the liver is right under the right side of the abdomen and is the energy center that helps us protect and defend ourselves and say no to what doesn't serve us. The liver physically is the primary organ of detoxification and is associated with anger in both traditional and Western and Oriental medicine. And the liver itself helps the body get rid of things that aren't good for us. So that the energy of it steps up to say, no, that's not right for me, and push it away. I have every right to say no to that which doesn't serve me, to that which causes me pain and suffering and harms me. I have absolute right to say no and stand up and resist pressure from anyone that is trying to force me to do something that is harmful to me. Okay? And I have every right to make my own choices to determine what was good for me. So the liver is tied up in will, okay? If we are willful, we'll try to change other people. If we lack will, we'll let other people try to control us, and finding the balance between those two is what this energy center is all about. Now, when I don't have a good liver energy center, which often happens because I was abused as a child. Now, what I mean by abuse in this case is I was undue harshness was used against me. It could be sexual abuse. It could be physical abuse. It could also be verbal abuse of just having a lot of anger put out at me. So I was never allowed to develop my own will. My parents tried to smother, control me to the point that they didn't allow me to say no. They didn't allow me to assert my own opinion, which can cause the liver energy to either hyperactivate and the person becomes rebellious and so on and so forth, or to underactivate and it crushes the child, and the child becomes accommodating and meek and timid and has a hard time making their own decisions. And the one area, if their will is crushed, they'll tend to feel tired and discouraged and overwhelmed, and could get depressed and even become suicidal and lose the will to live. So if we have a positive liver energy, we can exercise self-control, and we manage our own lives. We have a drive to work hard and better our lives. We have the ability to stand up and defend ourselves and other people that we love. We have the ability to fight back to when someone's trying to hurt us, and we have the ability to say no to what doesn't serve us. That's healthy liver energy. Now, again, what causes damage to this center is being abused as a child. So that one surrenders one's will to the abusive person in order to try to avoid the abuse. Or being taught that it's never okay to be angry. And this is something that I had to work through, because I somehow absorbed the belief when I was young that getting angry was evil, that one should never be angry. And so I learned to really totally suppress my anger. And and that makes you a doormat. That lets other people walk off. And you may think I'm being a very, very spiritual person. I'm being very loving. I'm being very, kind, and I'm martyring myself for everybody else. But it really isn't. It isn't healthy. It doesn't work. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help the people you're martyring yourself for. Okay. Also, being overly controlled as a child. Not parents who aren't letting children make their own decisions. Overly protective parents will also cause harm to the liver energy. And you can have, people not only mistake your kindness for weakness, but your kindness isn't true kindness, because true kindness also comes from a position of strength, where you have the total ability to say no, where you choose whether you're going to say no or you're going to say yes, and you're choosing to say yes. And here's how you tell the difference, okay? If you do something out of true kindness, you do not care whether the other person accepts it or not. If it bothers you that they're not recognizing and liking your kindness, and you resent the fact that you're doing all these nice things for you and they're not appreciating you or whatever, you're doing it out of weakness, not out of kindness. And we'll talk more about that in the next lesson when we get into human relations, because if you truly do something in love, you don't care whether the other person receives it or not, whether the other person recognizes it or not, because love is unaware of itself, okay? So a lot of times when we have a poor liver energy center, we think we're being nice, but when really we're just letting ourselves be doormats, and we're teaching other people around us that it's okay to be demanding and selfish and so on and so forth, and we'll just take it no matter what. And that doesn't help them grow, right? So like I said, this is where the dichotomy comes. How do I stand up for myself and also be kind? It's like, and that's the wrestling of this whole level of our being. It continues at a higher level as we mature, but these are things that can physical health problems that can show up as a result of this energy center being damaged include gallbladder problems. I wound up with a gallbladder filled with gallstones, and I knew the minute I got diagnosed with it that was from years of suppressing my anger, of suppressing the bile, the gall inside of me. It can show up as constipation, and of course, skin problems, PMS in women, prostate problems in men, frequent headaches. Shows up as tension in the neck and shoulders, difficulty urinating, a hiatal hernia, shallow breathing, ileocecal valve problems. An open ileocecal valve is taking too much crap from other people. And also weakness of the immune system, which goes more into the next center above it, which is the thymus center, than it does here, but it still is interlinked because both the thymus center and the liver center are the two main defensive centers of the body. And problems with either one of them can cause problems with your ability to have your immune system work. So far, everybody I've ever worked with who has cancer has problems with the liver and or thymus energy centers, the self-protective side of their nature. And of course, emotionally, feeling tired and overwhelmed, feeling discouraged and depressed, feeling suicidal, lacking willpower, and being a people pleaser or an enabler of other people's bad behavior. So again, this was covered in module 3, but just this is the liver center affirmations that we have people say, and we muscle test them on to see where these issues are. But I also created on some of these, I probably should make a little chart for the power affirmations for people, because I've got some power affirmations for these. These are affirmations that are related towards all of these 12 qualities of our soul and basically affirming these things. So the power affirmation for the liver is, I am the controlling power of my own thoughts, feelings, and actions, directing my life and my energy for the highest good of myself and others. That's a pretty powerful affirmation. Personal boundaries. So I talked about this also in module 2. I'm just again reiterating that personal boundaries separate what we control from what we don't control, defining what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate. And personal boundaries allow us to maintain control of ourselves. They don't help us to control anybody else. They help have control in ourselves. When we try to control what we don't have control of or fail to control what we do have control of, we have holes in our personal boundaries. And you can go back to module 2. There's a lesson on that goes into more detail. And again, we're not in control of and responsible for what other people think or believe, even our own children. We're not responsible for other people's attitudes and emotions and how they choose to treat us. We're not in control of how other people see us or how they treat us. We're not in control of the choices and actions of others, and that includes spouses, children, and other family members. And we're not in control of the weather. We're not in control of nature. We're not in control of the government. We're not in control of world events. We're not in control of acts of God. We have influence on all of these things. And you have to recognize the difference between your influence and your control. Control means I have the absolute power to make happen what I will happen. Influence is I can help to shift it. Okay, I can help to shift it, but there are other factors that are involved that it may or may not shift. So we are in control of and responsible for my own thoughts and my own beliefs. my attitude towards what is happening in the world, how I choose to use the energy of my emotions in making choices in my life, and how I choose to behave or act in any given circumstance, or how I choose to behave or act or treat other people. I am responsible for my thoughts. I'm responsible for my choices. I'm responsible for directing my emotional energy in the direction I want. I am in total control of this. Or let's put it this way. Most people aren't in control of this. They're trying to control this, and they're not controlling this. This is what I can control. This is what I cannot control. In fact, Napoleon Hill went so far as to say that since the Creator only gave one thing that we have absolute total control of, which is our mental attitude, what the thoughts that we are holding in our mind are the only thing over which we have absolute and total control. And therefore, the Creator must have made that sufficient to create every other positive thing in our life. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, being in the concentration camp of Nazi Germany, also said, the ultimate freedom is the freedom that I have to control my attitude towards what is happening. In other words, referring back to the same idea as Napoleon Hill, my thoughts. I have the control over that at all times. But most of us make no effort to control our thoughts. We just let all of the beliefs and programs and ideas that were taught to us by our parents and by our siblings and by teachers and by priests and leaders and blah, 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 and the media and all that just to flow in, and we just let them all just run around in our head, and we don't make any effort to control what's going on in our mind. Instead, we just try to control everything out there, and we feel frustrated and whatever, but we aren't taking control of our own thoughts. And this is important to understand, that the idea of responsibility and accountability. Now, again, excuse me, everything I'm talking about, I could go into way more detail on. I'm going to do a series next year just so I can talk about stuff like this. But responsibility goes with accountability. If I am responsible for something, it's because I have control over it. And if something is not in my power to control, I can't be responsible for it. So since I can't control my children's behavior, I am not responsible for my children's behavior. Now, that sounds really weird to most people, but it's absolutely true. You have to read Children in the Challenge by Rudolf Dreikers to understand this. I am responsible for how I choose to react to the behavior of my children. That's what I'm in control of. I'm not in control of my children. I am responsible to my children, not for my children. There's a difference. Meaning I have responsibilities towards my children. I have responsibilities to teach my children. I have responsibility to model good behavior for my children. I have responsibility to establish logical consequences where a natural consequence doesn't work. But I am not responsible for whether my child decides to choose to what she decides to choose, only for how I choose to react to that. And you have to separate that. And that's a difficult thing for most people to learn. But if I am in control, I am accountable, meaning that whatever the consequences of the choices are, those consequences are no one's fault but my own. The fact that I believed what someone else told me and I did it and it didn't work is not their fault. You have to get that into your head. It is your fault. You chose to believe them. You chose to try that. It didn't work. So you just go, all right, that didn't work, because then placing blame doesn't do anything. Then I will try something different. In order to be free, you have to be both responsible and accountable, meaning you have to, number one, willing to control your own life. And number two, take accountability for the consequences of your own life. You can't, if you're going to be free, you can't say, oh, I'm going to, this is what I'm trying to teach my stepkids. You can't run out and go, okay, I'm going to do what I want, and then you have to fix it. No, I'm not going to fix your stupidity. My 10-year-old, like, deliberately got himself into a bodily position that he cannot get up from the floor, and then said, come help me. Well, my daughter Katie, picked him up, and then he did it again, and both of us said, sorry, tough luck. I'm not going to bail you out if you keep, putting because I want them to understand that I'm not responsible for the fact. I'm not going to, if they continue to do the same stupid thing, I'm not going to bail them out of it, because that will prevent them from taking responsibility for their own life. So the point is that can anger be loving? We're told to love our neighbor as ourselves, and that means that we should not do to others things that we wouldn't want them to do to us. But there's a corollary to that. We should not also allow them to do things to us that we wouldn't do to them. Okay? Dysfunctional anger is about trying to make them change, but functional anger is asserting my right and my responsibility of self-control and saying, no, I'm in control of my life, all right? And I have to make the choices that are right for me. Now, these are some of the flower essences. Again, this is just a review of what's in there. It's just in the notes for reference. Some of the essential oils that can help the liver energy center. And, here's another one of the flower essences. I actually accidentally left in 2 slides. Now let's move on to the pancreatic energy, which is actually fun. The pancreatic energy, which is on the X is on the wrong place on the side. Sorry, it's in the blue circle. Should be the blue circle. Sorry. It's the home of the playful inner child. It's a seat of pleasure and excitement, the ability to have fun and laugh. So the pancreas has 2 functions. One, it produces enzymes to digest food, and it regulates blood sugar. On an energetic level, moving up to the energetic, i.e. emotional, mental level, the pancreas is the ability to let in, to absorb, to assimilate what is good. In other words, to nourish self. Understand? Navel energy is the basic nurturing that we originally get from our mom, but the ability to inner nurturing resides in the pancreas. And I like to think of it as the home of what little girls are made of: sugar and spice and everything nice. It's on the feminine energy side of the body. So it's the energy that makes life sweet. That's another way of saying it. It's the energy that makes life sweet. The liver is associated with bitterness, like the gall of bitterness. The pancreas is associated with sweetness. Okay? The bitter and the sweet in life. Okay? People who have a weakened pancreatic energy tend to take life too seriously and have trouble laughing and having fun. So a lot of times I'll see people who have a shutdown liver and they have an overactive pancreatic energy center, or a shutdown pancreatic center, then they have an overactive liver energy center. So people who are angry and irritable all the time often have a shutdown pancreatic energy. They don't know how to have fun. They have a hard time understanding real pleasure and joy in life. So if I have a positive pancreatic energy, I can play, I can laugh, I have a good time. I can tell in classes people who have shut down pancreatic energy centers, when I get into my laugh, which I'm not going to do because it's so loud, but I go and I start just doing a belly laugh in front of the class. And the people who have a good pancreatic energy center, they start laughing with me, and the other people who are standing there are like, what's wrong with you guys? I did this in a class once. He says, you're weird. Nobody should laugh like that. That's, and I thought, boy, you really have a shutdown pancreatic energy center, because it allows you to take in, it allows you to have fun. Humor allows you to basically cope with bad stuff in a nice way. Okay. It allows the more kind part of your nature, the more fun-loving part of your nature. Like if you can respond to someone's anger at you with a little playfulness and humor, okay, you sometimes can deflect it, you know? You can give them a soft answer that turns away wrath. But pancreatic energy allows you to relax into or experience pleasure. So the biggest wound I've found that causes pancreatic energy is having to grow up too fast. Okay, and this happens sometimes from, you know, a parent dying. I know I've done work with someone who, like, his dad died when he was young and he was the oldest and he had to like start working at a very early age, or people who really didn't had a parent who just wasn't very responsible, and so they kind of stepped in. This often happens with an older child. They step in and they become the surrogate mom and dad to the younger kids. They never have a childhood. They're never able to like really have a enjoyable childhood, or there are people who are punished that and they grow up with the idea that having any kind of pleasure is sinful. That you know, that everything has to be very stoic, very rigid, so forth. I've seen people who their parents punish them for smiling or laughing. You know, we say things like, wipe that stupid grin off your face, stop laughing. And also I can see people who have damaged pancreatic energy, like when children are laughing, okay? Like when I go to a playground and I hear children laughing, I think it's a delightful sound to hear children laughing and playing. People have a closed pancreatic energy goes, they're actually annoyed by that sound. Because you understand, if they opened up to that, it would awaken their own pancreatic energy. They've suppressed that. They've put that in. They're overly serious about things, okay? And physically, this manifests as digestive weakness, problems with your digestive tract, but mostly as blood sugar imbalances. And the big thing I notice about people who have a shut down pancreatic energy center, and it is that they crave sweets. But the more you crave sugar, the more it is that you're probably not experiencing sweetness in your life, and you're substituting sugar for sweetness in your life. Of course, it's not just sugar. They can also be addicted to drugs and alcohol and other things because, again, they're trying to find pleasure in their life. And of course, these are not healthy ways to find pleasure in your life, because these things, while giving you a temporary pleasure, give you a long-term letdown, right? So the ultimate result is not pleasure, but pain. And yet you continue to do it and do it more and more in order to try to searching for this elusive happiness that you lack. See, addiction is not pleasure. Genuine pleasure leads to a sense of satisfaction, and addiction is the pursuit of pleasure with never being able to actually find it. Because pleasure is not something you find. It's not something you go out and create. It's not something you go out and pursue. That's liver energy, all right? You can't grasp it. You can only surrender to it. You can only open to it. When there's a beautiful sunset, you have to be able to stop and look at it and go, oh, wow. You have to be able to stop and smell the rose and go, you have to take it in. You have to be able to absorb it. And what addiction is trying to escape pain, which is not the same as experiencing pleasure. I really like this little quote from Conversations with the Masters by Anthony DeMello. He says, the master never seemed to have his fill of gazing at his newborn child. What do you want him to be when he grows up? Someone asked. Outrageously happy, said the master. A lot of people want things for their children, And they think that they're going to push this or that or the whatever on their children. But what this is saying is what we should really desire is happiness. So the emotional things you see from pancreatic thinking is being overly serious and intellectual, having a poor sense of humor, a lack of joy or happiness in one's life, the inability to experience pleasure, to really just surrender to and enjoy a pleasurable experience. And it will tend, because of that, you will tend to activate the liver to be overactive. It'll be dominant because the polarity is out of balance. You haven't found the balance between these two things in yourself. And so you tend to be irritable and angry. I love this thing that Michael Singer says in his book, The Untethered Soul. He says, people tend to burden themselves with so many choices, but in the end, you can throw it all away and just make one simple, basic underlying decision. Do you want to be happy, or do you not want to be happy? It's that simple. Once you make the choice, your path in life becomes clear. Most people don't dare give themselves that choice because they think it's not under their control. Someone might say, well, of course I want to be happy, but my wife left me. He says, in other words, they want to be happy, but they don't want to be happy if their wife leaves them. But that wasn't the question. The question was, very simply, do you want to be happy or not? If you keep it that simple, you will see that it is in your control. Now, remember, the whole thing I'm trying to say about mastering this level is that I am in control, okay? I have the choice to view how I react to the circumstances of life. I have the choice to, and how I react, the choices I make, the seeds I plant, the thoughts and beliefs I create will determine whether I am happy or whether I am in pain. So I can choose, okay? I can choose that, yeah, it hurt because my wife left me, but I can still choose to be happy because the choice is in my control. If I put it out there that things have to be a certain way in order for me to be happy, I'm going to be unhappy because I'm conditioning my happiness on things that are outside of my control. Okay? It's just that you have a deep-seated set of preferences that get in the way with you being happy. You don't really mean to say you're willing to be happy. You want to qualify it. You want to say that as long as this or that doesn't happen, you're willing to be happy. That's why it seems like it's out of control. Any condition you place on your happiness will limit your happiness because you're again saying, I won't enjoy life if life doesn't go my way. If I don't get my will, then I'm not going to be happy. But if you open up your pancreatic energy, I remember I had just had some of the biggest disasters that hit me, that have ever hit me in my life. And it was a very difficult time in my life. And I was out in my garden and I saw a butterfly and I went, wow. And just my heart just filled with joy. And I thought, see, you can have joy if you remain open to it, no matter what's going on in your life. But what happens is we close ourselves down. Oh, I'm hurting, blah, 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 I can't deal with it. And then we shut down our energy and we no longer can be happy. And we're gonna get that in the next thing with the thymus and heart energy too, but it's really what happens. So these are the pancreatic center affirmations. I need to get the power affirmations up for that too. And then these are the essential oils that we talked about in module 3. And here are the flower essences, which you also talked about in module 3. And that's the end of the slide presentation. So if you have pain in the area around your pancreas or your liver or whatever, you probably have some level of energetic blocking there. There's not a movement, a flow of energy in there. And that often refers back to some kind of an emotional wound that you have. Now there could be a physical reason for it. Okay, you could be lacking in chromium or zinc or some of the nutrients that your pancreas needs to be healthy. But if you're doing the things physically to help your pancreas and it doesn't work, then I always believe that means there's something emotional there that you need to deal with. And when you look at the stuff I've been talking about today, there are very, very few people in our culture who can do this, who can work and be productive and be responsible and be in control of their lives and also be happy and have this, and therefore develop this sense of inner peace and inner confidence and so forth. That means there are very, very few people who have matured emotionally beyond the age of 12. My experience is that most adults are stuck in their emotional development somewhere between birth, well, usually around 2 years old to 12 years old. And because they've never been able, well, first of all, they never had role models that helped them learn to deal with things. And then so they don't even understand what's going on. They just know that they're suffering, but they don't understand that those sufferings are coming because they're following patterns that were instilled into their being growing up that are dysfunctional belief systems that are causing them to think and choose actions that aren't working. And yet they've got this condition that if it isn't going to be my way, okay, if I can't do what I want and also get what I want from it, I'm going to be upset. But God made it so that when you're doing it His way, it works. And when you're doing it your way, it doesn't. It's that simple. Okay? The end result of every action is the seed. All right? Every thought that I put into action is a seed. And once I put it into action, it will grow a crop that will yield exactly what the seed I planted was. So if I'm going to be free and I'm going to be happy, I have to take responsibility and understand that if I'm unhappy, it is because the seeds I am planting in my belief systems with my thoughts and the things I'm doing are generating unhappiness, misery, suffering in my life. And I have to be willing to accept that. That's why it's important that people feel their emotions. Because if I'm in denial that I'm angry and upset and I'm frustrated and I'm angry and all that stuff, then I can't ever face the fact that what I'm doing is not working. Understand? I'm trying to convince myself it's working when it's not working. But if I go in and I get in tune with myself and I realize this isn't working, now I can explore and be open to, well, what would work? And then I can have a new belief that comes in and I try that belief out. I test that belief by acting on it. And it starts to yield a different result, one that I like. Then I know that this new belief is better than the old belief. And I can move forward. Okay? And someone asked a really good question. Could there be a generational emotional wound? And the answer is absolutely. I have seen generational emotional wounds many, many times. In fact, they get, these things do get passed on from in family lines where there's tendencies. This is why there's tendencies to alcoholism in families, why there's even tendencies to suicide in families, or because you have family patterns. And when you break those family patterns by doing emotional healing work, it actually helps your entire family. It actually helps change both your descendants and also even helps change your parents and the people who went before you. I'm glad someone says this is beginning to make sense. If it takes some pondering and some thought to comprehend this, and it also takes some inner work. And I would encourage you to come, if you have a chance, to come to a workshop where I actually can work with you on this. But even then, just understanding this and starting to look at your life this way, you will start to uncover your emotional wounds. And I guarantee that if you just pray and take it to God, God will go, and you're willing to be open, because part of the problem is most people are not even willing to give up their ideas about God or whatever, even if they're not working. But if you're open to it, God will come and say, well, this isn't working, is it? So why don't you try this? And then you have the faith to try what God inspired you to do, and you find out, oh, well, that works. Okay. Oh, all right, I get it. That the idea of surrendering our will to God is sort of, we think of it as this kind of, self-martyring. I'm, surrendering to your authority kind of. No, what God wants is for us to be happy. Okay. God wants us to be successful. He wants us to be healthy. He wants us to be happy. So we may be continuing to do it our way and creating misery and suffering and whatever. And then, but if we turn to God, God will say, well, why don't you do this way? And always his way leads to something good. You experience the good results. And then you know that the word is good, that the idea that you were given, the divine inspiration was good. Because why? Because it yields love, peace, happiness, joy, the fruits of the Spirit, patience, all of those wonderful emotional attributes that we acquire when we are living in a spiritual life in tune with the inner ability of conscience to determine good and evil, and we're choosing good. I hope that all makes sense. We're a little over time tonight, but yes, and God does reveal this information layer by layer. He peels off your onion one layer at a time and keeps working on you until he perfects you. But you have to be willing to stop and realize, let go of your little ego self that says, I got to keep doing it this way. I got to make this happen. But realize this isn't working. I need help. I need to change. Something inside of me isn't working right. And so I need a change. Next class, and I need to look at the calendar right here. And the next class will be next week. We will talk about building healthy relationships, which gets up into taking the same idea we just talked about here, but elevating it up into our more social world of how we interact with others and in the heart and thymus energy centers. So that this will be a very, very, very important lesson next week about the 3 levels of human relationships and about what love really is in those centers. I think that you'll really enjoy this. So I hope all of you will catch me next week. And meanwhile, have a good evening, and I'll talk to you again. Good night.